That's us. Welcome to Inside the Artist Studio. I'm Rose Frederick, your fearless curator, and I am here with Ken Spencer, David Griffin, and Timothy Standring. Sorry, I was just putting some people on mute there. So everybody who's popped in for our chat today, please use the chat box and I'll read those questions and comments to our artists, and so everybody can see them and hear them. And two, I would really encourage you to ask questions because I guarantee you're not the only one wondering. So without further ado, hello, gentlemen. How are you all?
Morning, Rose.
Good morning.
Morning.
So every time a group of artists gathers on one of these, and you all pick your own time slot, I don't put you into slots at all, but there's always some like connecting thread. It's always interesting, and I was thinking, I wonder what this will be today. And I was listening to you all talk before we went live, and it was this conversation about traveling all over the country, and Timothy is our biggest wanderer of all, I think.
Or do you want some pasta?
So I have a feeling that travel is going to be a common link among us today. So anyway, hey Timothy, let's start with you.
Tell me, I'm just back from Italy.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Germany, and I spent about 4 weeks in a small town between Verona and Bologna called Mantua, and it was just terrific. Kind of spending time bringing out my kit, my watercolor kit. I didn't bring oils on this trip, but doing the various castles as well as the various rivers surrounding the city itself. And when I work on site, I tend to put a timer next to myself and say about 30 minutes, and that keeps my mind focused. And a lot of people would stop by, and while it's having people stop by, here's my story, is that we're fundamentally performing for a couple of people walking by, watching us paint. And to tell you the truth, that really keeps the mind focused.
It does. It doesn't doesn't it make you nervous? Does it make you nervous, people watching you?
No, not anymore. I mean, it is what it is, and it depends on what stage you are when they stop by. But you can kind of also explain to them, here I'm blocking this in, or this is preliminary, or here's how I set up. And they say, where are you from? And they're just surprised that you're from Colorado, in a place in Mantova, in Lombardy, in the middle of Italy, northern Italy. Wow. But it's greatly rewarding. But I paint. I bring my small watercolor kit with me, and my museum career has helped me travel about 100,000 miles a year, and every place where I go, I open up my kit and paint.
Wow. Hey, so let's talk about that, because you are now a curator emeritus at the Denver Art Museum and consulting on some projects. So for people who don't know that, and I'll say this, that something that I just love about your work, and I first saw your work at Metropolitan Frame a few years back when they did a little show, and I was like, what? I mean, of course you also paint, right? But
well, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Were you a frustrated artist who got into curation, or did you just sort of let this go when?
It's a really good question. I think the circle is closing in. I started off as a painter in college, and maybe the program where I went to school at the University of Notre Dame wasn't terribly challenging, and so I opted for that, which was a challenge, which is to graduate as an art history major, then went off and got an MA and PhD, and then the Gypsy Scholar Circuit teaching, and then went to the museum field for 32 years at the Denver Art Museum. But I never stopped painting. And now people say, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be known as a painter.
Oh.
So the past 10 years, I've really focused on a more professional side. And I've been fortunate to have such rewarding colleagues in Denver
Mhm.
of Daniel Sprick and Raj Chahandri and others, and Jane Jones and many others who've been encouraging. And I guess I'm like Picasso. I just don't borrow, I steal.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, and I'm fortunate at such events that is coming up. I met David last year, and I was just blown over by David's landscapes, and I can't wait to spend more time standing in front of them. We were all afraid of COVID last year. I'm less afraid this year, but I can't wait to see his works, and also Ken, to spend time with your works as well. But the trajectory of artists, we're all different.
Mhm.
And I think visually, and I want to communicate visually. And I have mentored younger artists, and I see the struggles that they're going through. And so I want to paint every day.
Wow. Okay.
And-
So with
And
that
I'm sure
segue,
Ken and David are the same way.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know what? And mentoring younger artists is also something that we're going to talk about with David in particular, who's embarking on a new project. But let's stick with you. I'm going to screen share, and let's take a look at this work that you have. Okay, so you were talking about watercolors and traveling with watercolors, which makes complete sense, because generally the airplane flight attendants do not care for terpenoid on their craft. So
No, but you can. But I've actually traveled with oils, and you just put it in your luggage.
yeah.
And also they make a gel terpenoid, which I apparently, and then you just put a big note and say everything is vegetable based, and there's no flash point. So there's ways around that. But I've been working in oils, and my oil painting is influenced how I paint my watercolors as well. And this one, Suspended, is my most recent oil. It's 16 by 16, and I'm thrilled with it. And that took a goodly amount of time to kind of pull that all together. But I like the tight handling as against the more loose painterly way that I would work with my watercolors. But the story behind this is I very much like the colors of the alluvials of the Spanish onions and the yellow onions and the shallots. I like to joke with friends and say that I'm actually the shallot master.
That's awesome.
But and I can't wait to stand in front of that, in front of a number of people coming by, and talk to them about that and how the whole thing was put together.
You know, I don't know if this painting was playing on my brain subconsciously when I was at the grocery store the other day, but I now have a bowl full of red, white, and yellow onions and garlic and shallots. So I got to get cooking. But this painting was so much fun. When I saw it, because you brought it while I wasn't in the gallery, it was leaning against the wall, and I'm like, who's that?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, Rose, thank you. But you know, as David and Ken can probably talk about, working in two different kind of styles at the same time, modalities of tight and loose, they really help and influence each other. For example, the actual live painting is much more spectacular, especially with that sort of olive green background. And I was thinking of Whistler when I was painting that. And it was just a very brave jump into a different pigment that's playing off of the peppers and the radishes in the foreground.
And it's an interesting thing too, that I think as viewers, we take certain things like that for granted. It's like, oh, he just threw some things on a table and said, there we go. But that background is such a beautiful complement to the peppers and turnips that it just feels really good.
Well, thank you. And, I try to divorce my curatorial career and my art historical career, but I've actually written a lot about artists, and I'm particularly in the back of my mind, that art historical career is really kind of an influence how I paint. This is an interesting painting because I originally planned it to be horizontal.
Oh.
And then, kind of like Kandinsky, I turned it on its side and said, oh God, this reads much better in the vertical. And there you have it. And it was particularly difficult to get all the roots on the various Spanish onions.
Why is that?
So, well, just having the nerve of pulling it off and making sure that you're getting two pigments on each root to give it volume. So each of those little hairs. But I like these challenges, and also, for example, the little bit of highlight underneath that shallot in the middle. That was a particular challenge. But I'd like to hear from David and Ken. I'm sure they share the same kind of challenges that I faced in paintings such as this.
Well,
And,
right. That kind of brings up an interesting question, or it begs the question, is these problem solving that you all do. All artists are problem solving. I think you lay down a brush stroke and that creates a problem, right?
Right.
A good problem. But
well, and it's,
painting, I mean, it's
commensurability, because once you establish something down, and the sad thing about it is that few people really recognize the challenges that artists painting in the realist vernacular are really solving very complex, difficult problems of the art itself. And
well, because you have viewers come at it and they go, oh yeah, I love red onions. Yeah, it looks like a red onion. And someone else comes by and says, oh, why didn't he put in green onions? That would have been, right. I like green onions. But I mean, it's just like everyone brings this stuff and you have to solve problems, but also make it make sense to people who don't paint.
Right. So, and then this is, I consider one of my best watercolors, because I was trying, it took 3 hours to paint this on a porch outside of St. Augustine, looking west, and there was just kind of a jungle right across from the porch where I was painting. But I was very much influenced by laying in colors and then putting more opaque pigments on top and then scoring through. And I just love this. And I hope a number of other people do as well.
I think that's an interesting thing with watercolor, that it looks, and saying this took you 3 hours is something, I think that's kind of important, because it looks effortless. It looks like you just kind of got it done. What's next? Yeah. What's for lunch?
Yeah, well, it's really easy to ruin the whole thing if you make a mistake. But you go into your Zen moment when you're painting, and you're hoping that nobody's going to come by and say, am I disturbing you? Which
Yes, you are.
nobody came by and said that to me, but here we are.
I love it. I
Isn't
love
this
it.
great? And this one, very briefly, because I don't want to take up the whole show
Oh,
here.
no,
But
you're
this
good.
one,
You're good.
well, this one, we took our daughter Zoe up to Bismarck, North Dakota, and she's becoming a doctor of occupational therapy. And we drove up on the mighty Missouri, and this is about 9 o'clock at night in the middle of August. And those dark, foreboding skies were on the horizon there. And I just feel so, this was about a half an hour because it was starting to rain. And I just like the emotive character of the entire work, and how the various Prussian blues and Payne's gray, those colors in the skies really pulled it off with little bits of violet in it.
You know what I always love in watercolor is how these drips form, like here, and then puddle.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's like I always wonder, here's my watercolor question. Are those intentional or happy accidents, or a mix of both?
They're a mix of both.
Yeah.
And I just left it actually because it was raining.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And Mount Princeton, I
Wow.
can't wait to go back to Buena Vista again and paint from this point of view on a number of occasions. But I like the skies against the Mount Princeton in that range, and I feel very happy about this one.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Is this human life down here in the bottom center? Is that the suggestion of?
Actually, yes, it is, because I'm painting it. So the prison is right below where you had your marker. The women's prison along, I think it's Highway 24. And I'm up above across Mount Princeton. You can take a road up there, and it's just stunning.
Wow.
Quiet. I guess I should put some birds flying in the next couple. But David, maybe you can help me with that.
Well, I can scare up some birds. I'll do that. I'll scare them up, and it's up to you to capture them. I'll scare them up.
I love it. I love it. Okay, let me.
Well,
pull
I'm
out.
thrilled to be here and talk about this with all of you.
Well, I'm glad you're back home, and I have to tell you, I think when we start talking about travel, I'm beginning to think I should have put you last, because now Ken and David are not going to want to talk about it. Yeah, I was just in Italy, and all right, Timothy, please stay put. We're going to come back to you.
Okay.
Hey, David.
I'm right here. Thank you.
I'm putting a spotlight on you, my
Okay,
friend.
well, that's dangerous. Would you mind just putting Timothy's face back on here, and mute him, and I will talk, and his mouth will move.
Yeah, I think we all know Timothy is not from Texas, so
Yeah, well, that would be appropriate.
that's not
and-
gonna work.
And I can't disguise the fact that I am.
Hey, are you in Colorado right now?
This is my studio in Colorado, my favorite place to be.
Mm.
You can see the hats. Those are my father's hats
Oh,
behind me, and my grandfather's 120-year-old saddle.
oh my
So
God.
I have that in my studio to remind me of my own heritage. And then it inspires me by the same token of just having some roots in the dirt. Since I paint the dirt, I've got some actual roots in the dirt. So that's kind of, no pun intended. It does ground me, though.
Yeah, for sure. So you were our featured artist last 2 years ago. Two years ago. Right.
Well, yeah, and then I got, I was already featured artist 2 years in a row, by the way. We held it back.
Right.
Anyway.
Yes, because you were going to be our featured artist and then COVID hit. And I called you and said, I think this is going to be a bummer because no one can get in and see the work in person. And that's, we didn't have a featured artist for 1 year. So yeah, but you were a good sport. I appreciated that.
Well, who would not pass up the opportunity to be in this show and of course, to be in that kind of spotlight? I was not comfortable with the spotlight, but I sure loved the fact that I got to see a lot of people and meet Timothy last year. And I'd seen Ken, and it's always good to see people that I admire and respect. And we all draw things from people, and I mean, not physically drawing, but we borrow things from people. We benefit from friendships. And man, Rose, this is my 14th year. So you've put me in front of a lot of people that I have had so much fun getting acquainted with.
Yeah, I just pushed you out of the nest, didn't I?
That you did, literally. You literally did. You literally did. I fell and hit my head a couple of times, but that was okay.
I don't think so. Hey, I'm going to do a screen share, but will you just talk a little bit about, is it University of Texas?
No, it's Texas Tech in Lubbock, where I went to school.
They've tapped you to kind of come in and talk to science department?
Well, I first got introduced about 4 years ago to the ag department, the animal science department at Texas Tech, which is a huge part of the school. A lot of ranchers' kids, farmers' children go to Tech for the ag education. It's a wonderful department. Well, about 5 years ago, a friend of mine named Scott White and Heidi Brady put together a book that they were going to use as their textbook. And it's art, it's the art of the horse, or horse and art. And so they had about 20 of us who had painted a lot of horses, contribute about 10 paintings apiece, and they did a book, and it's called, and so the book that we did, that we're included in our paintings and kind of explaining the paintings, is their textbook for this class. And so in the spring and the fall, I teach a class one semester, and there's probably 150 kids, 120 to 150 kids, and they're not art related at all. They come from a different background. And so it was really interesting for me to talk to them about art and about the horse. And you and I, all four of us know how many places the horse has been used in art. I mean, all over the world, from the caves in France to modern day Bill Anton or Jim Reynolds or Bill Owen or Jason Rich, or you just go down the list. Glenn Dean, all the ways that the horses are used in art. Anyway, now they've asked me to come over to the art department at Tech and speak on something different that I didn't get in school, and that was the fact, the business of being an artist. How do you actually make a living doing that? How do you function from day to day with a family, with responsibilities that brings?
Yeah.
How do you approach galleries? What do you do about submitting work to shows? How do you actually talk to a collector? What's the process of trying to engage someone in something you've done, a painting or a piece of art or a sculpture, and get them and start the conversation in their own mind, and then hopefully it will begin to they'll ask questions, as Timothy was referring to a while ago, and then at some point they're either engaged, or it resonates with them, or it doesn't. But learning how to tell your story other than through just the art, hopefully you're enhancing that. But that's the class. That's what I intend to be teaching, is these young artists that want to pursue this. Of course, the first question is, how do you talk to your parents about, hey, Dad, Mom, I'm going to be an artist. Okay, we know you're going to do that on the weekends, but what are you going to do 9 to 5? Well, I'm going to be an artist. Probably won't 9 to 5. It'll probably be 9 to 9.
Yeah.
Or,
or midnight. Yeah.
or midnight.
Yeah.
And so, having those conversations with people that that may have thought you were going to law school or med school, or you were going to, be an accountant or whatever it is, those jobs are easier to explain. So the conversations need to be had with young people that are wanting to be in a creative field, how they go about doing that. And in some ways, allowing their voice to be who they are. And that means this is what I want to do. And this is
Yeah.
what I think I was called to do.
Mhm.
Anyway,
All right.
that'll encompass that class. I hope will encompass those kinds of things.
Well, speaking of what you're called to do, hey,
There we
here's-
go.
Mm.
here's David's group of work. And you know what? I'm just going to dive in with the biggest one. And a quick comment about your class. I'm so grateful that you're teaching that. I can't tell you how many young artists come to me and they have no clue. And honestly, they don't understand the etiquette of really approaching a curator. I had one woman, I was giving a talk to a group of folks, and this young woman came up to me and she said, "I'm painting work for the Coors show right now." I'm like, "You are?" The show I curate? I don't even know who you are. And she said, "Yeah, I thought I would just bring some to you in December to put in the show." There was such a huge disconnect that all of you were invited to do the show a year ago and have been. So I'm really grateful that you're doing that. So anyway.
Well, that leads me into another area real quickly. I may get you on a Zoom call because everybody's experience is different, and having, I really want to be able to speak to everyone, and having a professional woman speak as you would if you did this or did that, it would help me. So I may call on you sometime we can collaborate on a class to do that. Maybe not in person, but
yeah,
anyway.
no, I would love to. And I bet Timothy Standring has a story or two.
Well, that's what's interesting about all this and so valuable to me is I've got so many resources to pull from. I mean, I can, just today, I've got a curator or two curators. I've got someone that's putting together podcasts to be able to talk to artists. I've got two professional artists that were both illustrators. So you're covering a lot of ground there about at least the visual arts, about how to speak to and be able to have questions answered by somebody that's that knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think it would help because it's got to be frightening to start out in this business.
Well, yeah, it is. You're right.
Hey, okay, so this painting, and you saw where you were in the other day, and you saw where I hung this painting, and so I'm just so excited because when you come around the corner back into the gallery, this painting is right there, and it is just joyful. Will you talk about what inspired this painting?
Yes. First of all, thank you for putting me in that good spot because I've been over there and you've rearranged the gallery and it really works. Talking to Ken Spencer a while ago about the Maynard Dixon country, which Susan and Paul Bingham used to put together. That was prior to that. I had visited and painted out in the Vermilion Cliffs area, which is the most northern part of Arizona and into southern Utah. And this is a mesa, and it's interesting. I didn't even think about this till today or this morning. Is that all these paintings have one thing in common, and they're all at the end of the day. So I don't know if maybe that was intentional. I hadn't thought about that till I see them all together. If anybody has ever been to the desert, and most of us have, if you spent time on the desert floor, you first of all, you understand the scale of the sky and the scale of the mesas or the mountains or the cliffs. And a panoramic view from a distance kind of takes some of that away. But what I was drawn to here, and I've really been redrawn, or I've been reminded of those sketches that I've done on location. So I went back to those to use for this, and it's called End of a Good Day. And I really wanted to emphasize the scale of how, when one person is standing out amongst this, you really get the feeling of how small you are in comparison to this beautiful creation.
And you
And,
know, I think like I would say too that you have to see this in person, because when you're talking about scale, because of the size you painted this picture, it does pull you in. It has such a strong presence in the gallery.
Well, thank you. That was what drew me to this. Of course, I'm into big skies, and that's my the interest that I've had in that regard. Just big skies of where I grew up.
Yeah.
This painting is called "Last Day of Summer."
Yeah.
You know, and people, they ask me periodically, where is this? Where could this be? Well, I grew up in West Texas, which is very flat, but this could be a lot of places. I was really drawn to this because of the reflection of the pool of water, the what was left over behind from the storm, but the thunderstorm. And here again, it's the late day, and the reflections coming off the water, and how those really can act as guideposts, lighthouses to move you through the painting. These little spots of light that are reflections of the sun because of the water reflective property. So using that as,
I have a question for you. Sorry. What so you were an illustrator, as was Ken. And so you like really were telling stories, but you had to spell everything out. How much of your painting now is what was happening on site or what you saw, and how much of it is you just going with a gut instinct and making it up? And
most in my case, Rose, a lot of it is intuition. A lot of it. I've talked to you about that before. I haven't heard that interview by Andrew Wyeth, and he talked about, someone was asking the question in this particular interview about what does he paint now? And he said, I paint from memory. He said, I have these little snippets of time in my head and these moments of strong visuals in my head. And I'm revisiting those. When something hits me, I'll revisit a memory I have. And so a lot of these places are just that. In fact, this next painting, a place I know, is a particular place, but it's more about what I have become as an artist and what I know from these places. But the memory is a strong part of this, and that is bringing back those the reason it stopped me. What stopped me in the first place was this late light. Well, where were you? Well, I don't remember exactly where I was, but I kind of know where it is. So it's when I use the words, a place I know. It's a place I know figuratively, but it's also a place I know in my mind. And so I'm able to use those. And when I heard Andrew Wyeth speak about that, that really resonated with me. I thought, I get that. I understand the fact that I'm really painting from something that stopped me in my tracks.
yeah,
It caused me to start thinking.
yeah. And this painting, to me, so there's no sky in this landscape.
Right.
You know, it's just this face of the, or the foothills and the sun shining on it, that last light shining on it. And I think because of that choice, it almost makes the mountain feel like the sky, or the mountain feel like a wave of, light and the world coming at you. But it's also just really sort of peaceful and dramatic, in this way, calming, I guess.
Well, I think, yeah, excuse me for interrupting. I tend to talk over people.
Yeah, me too.
Rose, you could answer my question. I mean, you could finish my sentences, and you do for the most part. I did this not to have the distraction of the sky. There was an intention here to cause the viewer and to me first for me to do this without not the distraction of the sky, but paint something that had a story in itself of the millennia of time that has passed. And this mountain is the same. It is the same today as it was 1,000 years ago. But yet this light hits it at this time of day, and it gives it another dimension about what you're looking at, the heritage and all those things. And so I didn't want the distraction of the sky. I really wanted to talk about how this piece of creation has weathered and what causes crevices and what are the stories being told here. Who's looked at this? Someone could have looked at it 1,000 years ago and seen the same thing. It's just there's a strong legacy of places I've been in this particular one that really causes me to kind of stop and think about what's going on prior to me standing there looking at it.
Well, and it is it's interesting because art does give us that connection through time, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, you mentioned the caves in France, and I mean, that's such an ancient connection with
Well,
people.
and people have been, that's another thing about being creative is the creative process has been taking place since the beginning of time, and people have tried to communicate, tell stories, pass on legend, whatever it is. And a lot of it has been done with art, and so we're carrying on a lineage of a heritage of communication, and everybody's got an inspiration, like Timothy talked about. We're all growing in different ways, but still there's a thread of wanting to tell a story, or at least that's what I see. Tell a story about creation and what's happening.
Hey, why is this one called A Veiled Hope?
Well, that's a good question. I've talked to you about how important titles are to me. Now, that doesn't mean they're always going to make perfect sense to anybody else, but maybe they'll pose a question. Light in itself, light by itself, the sunlight, or in this particular case, the reflected sunlight on the moon, light always represents hope to me. That's one thing it always has, in a one-word explanation. Light, sunlight in particular, offers or describes hope to me. So because this cloud is in front of the moon and sort of as a veil, that's even there, it is hopeful, but it's in sort of a veiled circumstance. And I really want people to connect the dots, if you will, from the title to the artwork, in so much that they'll want to start a conversation or ask questions, because then that's where the value in what I do, or one of the values in what I do, is getting to talk about the process. And so if you get a chance to do that, that's always, I think, helpful as much for the artist as it is the viewer, the collector, or whatever.
Yeah, this one I adore. And I think this is such an interesting choice. Just all the elements, the way that you set this up and what you picked, and the title on this one to me makes complete sense, When All Is Right. There's just like, you took so many different things, and here's this sun shining through almost in the, kind of the middle, the top third of this painting. It just feels so wonderful and warm and contemplative.
Well, this is very close to my studio. In fact, it's right out the door. It's 10 feet off my back porch. So it's easy for me to go out there and just be completely baptized by this, if you will, completely immersed in this. And so, sometimes the most simple thing can tell the most complex story. And I think this is what drew me to this painting or this image, or what I saw this. I had to stop and go get my stuff. There are just times that, things make sense. And the title is about what I was thinking. Well, this is about as good as it gets. You better not walk away from this. talking to myself. So,
You know-
and anyway, that's sort of in a nutshell what I was thinking when I was stopped in my tracks by this and said, there's a story here and I want to try to tell it.
I feel like this painting, it could have, you could have gone too far with
Oh
it.
my, yeah, yes.
Yeah. Trying to say too much, but I think like for me, it's the little highlights on these leaves right in here,
Yeah.
that you could have gone too far, but it's just so subtle and nice. And it's one of those paintings that unfolds and unfolds and unfolds the longer you stand in front of it. I adore this painting.
Well, Rose, you've hit the nail on the head. It does unfold. And the older I get, Timothy and Ken can speak to this. In my particular case, simple is so much better. And I learned that at an early age, or an early illustrator's age. And it just began to make more sense to me that simple is always better for me. Less is more. And so that's how that story is to be told, is simple.
All right, David, hang on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ken Spencer, you've waited long enough. It's your turn. How are you?
Good. It's so fun to be with the four of you and whoever else is joining us. Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Yeah, well, I am so glad you're here from your studio in Utah. And oh my goodness, I love peering into everybody's studios and seeing what's on your easel. And I always come away from these talks thinking, can I get that next year? I gotta send them a note. Hey, so how has your year been since we talked last on this call?
Oh, that's a big subject. All good stuff. Life is good.
Yeah, it seems like you've been very busy and traveling and just getting a lot of work done in your studio.
Yeah, my wife and I traveled what was supposed to be our 30th anniversary trip. We were married in 1990 and had planned a big trip to France that was supposed to happen in 2020, which of course, everybody else's life, same thing, COVID happened and we postponed for 2 years and finally did that trip and spent a couple weeks in France, and that was great. I've got some wonderful material I'm hoping to get to paint before long from that trip.
Nice. Well, I can't wait to see it. And you'll have to just label some of that in Colorado, even though it's France. No, I'm kidding. Okay, I cannot wait to dive into these because when you brought these paintings in, luckily I was there, so it was fun. So I got to talk to you a little bit about it. This painting, An Arm and a Leg, I read the title first, or you told me the title, and I looked at it, and all I could see was the guy in the tractor going down the street. And then all of a sudden I see this on the Maverick sign, arm, leg. And it cracked me up. So will you talk about this a little bit? Because you're living in a rural area, right?
Yeah, this is, I actually live in Idaho. I grew up in Utah. I live now in Idaho, and this is in Idaho, this very scene. It's been manipulated, obviously, the arm and the leg, but in some other ways too. There's creative license and interpretation, but this is where I live, and this is about the people where I live. And I'm glad that it makes you laugh. I hope that's the case, but a little bit of nervous laughter. You know, the whole challenge of living is hard work, and there's adversity, challenges, difficulty, things beyond our control that happen. we get into a pinch, and what do? You keep going. You keep
Yeah.
you keep working and doing your best, and a little bit of laughter goes a long ways to
Sure,
making
for
life.
sure, right. So will you talk about why you put this together and created Arm and a Leg?
Yeah, well, I've I like the dynamic, the kind of the challenge between modern life and traditional life or historic life, our past with our future, and the challenges that come with managing new stuff, growth, the old and the new, the traditional and the and development of different sorts. So this idea, I had originally just thought I wanted to put this old tractor into a modern context and have that juxtaposition.
Mhm.
And then I don't even know what happened, but there was a shift, an idea that came to my mind about, of course, the gas prices, diesel prices spiked
Wow.
around this time, and the idea of an arm and a leg, that phrase everybody's familiar with, that something costs an arm and a leg, it's very expensive, and just how this tractor and the tractor and the farmer on the tractor just denotes not just farmers, but everybody going about their lives and going about their business, and the difficulty that comes in making ends meet, living life. And
Yeah.
so that phrase that everybody's familiar with, and this image just sort of it was a good intersection of
Yeah.
a visual and a concept.
Well, and it is it is in sort of a humorous way, but a serious way too, expressing that, yeah, life is, there are a lot of nuances to it, and everybody's affected by it universally.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
You have to make sacrifices, right? You don't
yeah.
know. I don't know nobody in my circles has enough money to do everything they want to do. And so you have to make choices, and that just depicts the pinch.
Mhm. Yeah. So speaking of crossroads, right?
Crossroads.
You come to a fork in the road, take it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Decisions, choices. Yeah. This is of course, this is a more subtle metaphor, but this intersection is offset. It's not just a straight, two straight roads intersecting, and the one road kind of in the middle that goes off into the distance between the two trees, in my mind, is saying, what's beyond, what's out there, what's around the bend.
Mhm.
And this is about choices. The rural rustic setting ties back to tradition, to our background, our history.
Mhm.
I love the setting. There's nostalgia in this.
Ah.
There's also the idea of choices and things we have to do.
Hey, you know what? Okay, yeah, let's talk about A House by the Side of the Road, because this was this one inspired by a poem, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a poem titled "A House by the Side of the Road," and this is my visual illustration, if you will, of this poem. And the poem essentially is the author of the poem saying that he wanted to live in a place where he could be a friend to man, a friend to his fellow being on their journey. And he hoped to live in a place where he could be of some service. And so I took some liberties and routed this road back and forth. It enters the bottom of the painting, and then it just seesaws back and forth. And hopefully the design leads the viewer to the mountain, up the mountain to the place of the summit, the climax, the pinnacle, whatever a person's goal is. And goals take work and effort, and there's uncertainty in them. And I love this poem that this author just said he hoped to live in a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man.
Oh, I love that. So we have these 3 wonderful 12 by 12 paintings as well, and I'm going to click through them. But these are just great. It's almost like you just caught a little part of a conversation as you were walking by.
Yep, exactly. On that one.
Yes. So and then Summer Pasture 2. And then the third one, I love this American Strength. And I think this really sums up, a lot of folks in the West who are farming the land, and who have workhorses. And, here's this guy in the middle of these 2 giant beasts, and who that could easily just crush him. But, he's, it's just life.
Yeah, the husbandry between man and animals, man and his surroundings is a recurring theme, something that's interesting, a dynamic that's interesting and beautiful.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I can never believe that we start edging up towards an hour, and it feels like I just got started with you all. So, but here we are. And so this is the part of our conversation where I like to turn it over to the 3 artists on the call, and let you talk to each other or ask questions or make comments. And for those of you listening, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. But Timothy, you've been quiet for a while. What are you thinking?
Well, if I were going to curate an exhibition of the 3 of us, I'd somehow put it under the rubric of poetry, because what I found the connective tissue with the 3 of us is that these are meditations on things that we've seen and experienced, and we're painting poetry. And that came across in all 3, well, at least, but David and Ken, I just love looking at your pictures and hearing your stories, but it's that poetic moment of internalizing what we feel and successfessfully reproducing it visually.
Well
No.
said.
Yeah.
Well,
Timothy,
I was a curator for a while.
You got the knack.
Tell me, David, what?
No, I was going to tell you that this is really interesting, and we were in Italy also this summer, but we were in a big somewhere museum, and I was reading whatever the curator had written about this particular painting, and Lorna saw it first. My wife, she said, "Come over here and read this." And the story was what Ken Spencer just said. This artist that was from the 15th century was inspired by a poem, and he read poetry every day. And Ken talking about this, and now you talking about this has been my sort of under the radar form of inspiration is poetry, and I've become really well acquainted with so many poets, and what Ken was talking about, that particular artist, author, really spoke to me, because I'll read these words, and Timothy, you've done the same thing. We'll read these words and to think, how can I go find a visual to say that?
Exactly.
know,
Exactly.
And I didn't realize how powerful poetry was going to be in my life. And now what you just said, I think it connects a lot of us.
Absolutely. Well, it goes back all the way to Horace, ut pictura poesis.
Okay.
Paintings are blind poets.
Oh,
And so
Can I write that down?
yeah, paintings are blind poets. That's awesome.
But
Well, can I just chime in there and say that
Yeah,
the
in
whole
here.
classical and neoclassical movements were visual depictions of stories, of mythology.
Yes.
That's what the whole genre was, classical and then in the neoclassical, telling the stories of the Greek gods and Greek and Roman gods, visual depictions of narratives and myth.
Can I correct myself? It's actually painters are mute poets. In
Ah,
other words, yes, not blind, but
That's-
it was a huge device from the Renaissance on, when the humanists were rediscovering what ancient authors had written treatise-wise about poetry and the visual arts. And it continues, and I think it underscores the paintings of the three of us this afternoon. And I think this should be something that we can pass on to younger artists, saying that you can think poetically and you can internalize what you're seeing and express that and put it onto your paintings. And the three of us know that the most satisfying is when we go, yes, I captured that moment.
Yeah.
Rose, can I pose a question? Do we have time, or do you need to close out?
sure. Yeah, no, go.
I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. It's interesting to consider the connection between truth and beauty.
Yeah.
Right? A poet is seeking to speak a truth, an observation, put it in such a way that causes the reader to think and to analyze and to evaluate and discover truth. And it's interesting how often historically truth and beauty are mentioned together. And the subject of what is beautiful is a big one, and far beyond the scope of the few minutes we've got together. But let me I'll stop talking, leave it at that. What are your thoughts about the connection between truth and beauty?
Read Keats.
Read Keats.
Yeah. This whole thing, and Ken, thank you. That's a wonderful question. But this whole conversation that we're having throughout this, particularly at this time, now I'm going to be interested in finding you guys, and Rose included, in saying, what are you reading these days?
Yeah.
What poetry are you reading? Because this is where, then our relationship, our friendships become even deeper. We're talking about a whole nother source of creativity that influences all of us. Anyway, this is really inspiring, Rose. I don't know if you intended to get off in poetry, but we could spend another hour talking about, or I could.
But David,
how valuable it is.
David, that's what our paintings are all about. I mean, they're poems, and it's misunderstanding that people think that those working in the realist mode are simply replicating what we're seeing. No, we're replicating what we're feeling. And I just love the fact that we're able to contribute to others watching this video, that poetic component in our paintings is fundamental to the enjoyment of us making it, but also communicating and having that sort of empathy shared with others.
Yeah.
Timothy, I think if you put your curator's cap on now, when you're curating a show, for me, a guiding principle is finding authenticity, which I think is truth and beauty.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's also that fearlessness of being able to, or allowing yourself to paint truth, your truth.
And take chances.
That's right.
I mean, some of the most successful pictures are those in which we got out of our paint box and said, I'm going to try vermilion. What can I do with vermilion? What can I do with another color? And seeing how that comes together, how we link our craft that we've learned, and with that poetic moment. And I know we're running short, but I wanted to say, David, it's so great that you're giving back to Texas Tech, and that you're giving that advice to younger artists. And you can call on me as a former curator to go on your Zoom class and say, how would young artists talk to curators in museums?
Oh, yeah.
And Ken, I look forward to seeing you maybe at one of the openings.
I look forward to it. You bet.
All right, gang. I hate to cut this off because we really could talk for at least another hour.
We could.
But to be continued. So the show opens January 3rd, and I look forward to seeing you all there. And there are still tickets available at CoorsWesternArt.com. And you can see everybody's paintings online, the sculptures and photography in the show as well. And I just have to say it again, it does not look anywhere as wonderful as it does when you see it in person. So you have to come see the show. That's all.
Amen. Amen.
Great.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Rose.
Timothy, thank you. I really appreciate your time today, and happy holidays, everybody.
Merry Christmas. That's
Chris.
Yeah.
good to see you guys. Thank you again. You make my life so much better.
Oh, come on.
Let's continue
Vice
the
versa
conversation
for
at the
all
show.
of us as well.
Yeah. We've got to get
Everybody
each
have a
other's,
good day.
we got to get
Okay.
each other's phone numbers. I got to call and bother you guys some more.
Yeah, I can
Do
already
that.
tell.
Do that. Okay. Thank you
Take
all.
care. Thank you, everybody.
So long.
Bye.